You've got 10 minutes to leave." Jaron said, his voice loud final, then flung the soup straight at my head. The shock didn't come from the heat. It came from the weight of it, the way the thick bisque clung to my hair, dripped down my cheek, slid into the collar of the blouse I had ironed just that morning. I blinked once, then again. My eyes burned. The smell of tomatoes, garlic, and scorched cream filled my nose. Across the table, Bree laughed. Not a cackle, just a soft, amused chuckle, like she was watching a poorly acted scene in a play. My hands stayed by my side. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't shout. I looked down the length of the table, the one I'd polished for 3 hours, the one that once held birthday cakes, casseroles, a jigsaw puzzle we never finished. Every plate was perfectly placed. Every napkin folded into a little pocket like I'd seen in a magazine once. Now soup splattered across the runner, dripping down the edges onto the carpet I bought with my first year's bonus. Jaron stood at the head like he owned it all. Bree sipped her wine with one hand and reached for her phone with the other. "Guess you should have knocked before walking in," Bree said, tapping record. They'd planned this. They waited until I came in with the bread rolls humming softly, thinking we might finally eat a meal without walking on glass. I'd even worn earrings. Gold ones. A gift from my sister the year I turned 50. "You're not going to say anything," Jaron pressed, as if silence was the bigger insult. I looked him in the eye. My face was wet, my chest sticky, but my breath was steady. "No," I said. "Not yet." I turned and walked upstairs, the soup cooling against my skin. 10 minutes. That's what he gave me. It would be more than enough. I wasn't born into money. My father laid bricks. My mother stretched groceries into soup, and I learned young how to balance a checkbook before I could parallel park. I worked for everything. No handouts, no shortcuts, just quiet, deliberate choices. This house wasn't handed to me. It was earned month by month, decade by decade. I paid off the first mortgage just before Jaron graduated college. The second time was harder. I refinanced to help him and Bree get back on their feet when his tech job disappeared and her real estate dreams fizzled out. I told myself it was just money. That family was worth the stretch. Now I was upstairs, soup crusting against the side of my neck, packing a handbag like a guest in the home I never stopped paying for. Bree's voice floated up the stairs, sweet and smug. "Don't drag it out," she said. "Just pack your stuff." I didn't answer. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the frame on the nightstand. Jaron at 10 years old, grinning, front tooth missing. I didn't pick it up. I'd already made my choices. Let them keep the pictures. Let them sit in the story they built. I opened the drawer where I kept important things. Medical papers, bank letters, a worn folder labeled only with the letter T, transfer. Inside it were the documents they never cared to read. The ones they signed in a rush, assuming they were about home insurance or updating emergency contacts. The room felt too quiet. Even their laughter downstairs had faded, like they were waiting to see if I'd come back down to beg. I slipped the folder into my bag and walked to the mirror. I wiped a streak of dried red from my chin. The soup was cold now, but the memory of the heat stayed. 10 minutes. I glanced at the clock. Time to go downstairs. Their laughter was thinner this time when I came back down. Bree glanced up from her phone, her thumb still hovering over the screen like she expected to press record again. Jaron leaned against the doorway to the kitchen, arms folded, a smirk tugging at one side of his mouth. The table between us was no longer a place to eat, it had become a stage. I walked past the broken silence and pulled out the same chair I had been sitting in earlier. The cushion was damp. I didn't flinch. They watched me. I opened my handbag slowly, deliberately, and placed the leather folder on the soup-stained tablecloth. My fingers left a smear where tomato had dried. I didn't bother to wipe it clean. Jaron scoffed. "What's that, your will?" I looked up at him. "Something like that." I unfastened the flap and slid out the contents, spreading them neatly. Trust documents. Property title. The notarized date from 9 months ago, stamped in clear ink. My name in bold where it mattered. Their signatures rushed and careless where they never should have been. Bree moved closer. Wine glass still in hand. Her eyes scanned the pages. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came. "You said this was for refinancing," Jaron muttered. "I did," I said. "And you didn't read it." He snatched one of the papers, eyes darting. "You tricked us." "No," I said, resting my hands on the table. "You assumed, and I let you." Bree dropped into the chair across from me, looking paler now. I folded my hands calmly, despite the dried soup pulling at my skin. "I'll leave," I said evenly. "But so will you." The timer I had started in my pocket buzzed softly. 10 minutes. I reached over and stopped it. Then I reached for the house phone. 6 months ago, I slid the papers across the kitchen counter while Jaron scrolled through job listings and Bree filled her smoothie jar. I told them it was an update for the homeowner's insurance, something the lender needed on file. They nodded, barely listening. Jaron signed without lifting his eyes. Bree followed with a dramatic flourish and a sigh, like I'd asked her to rewrite the mortgage. I had counted on that carelessness. Their indifference had become predictable. Now Bree leaned over the table, staring down at the documents. Her smirk faltered as her eyes moved line by line. She picked up the first page again, rereading the header. Her knuckles went white around the stem of her wine glass. "This isn't real," she said flatly. "This has to be illegal." "It isn't," I said. "It's notarized. Recorded. Public, if you bother to look it up." Jaron pulled one of the pages toward him, squinting at the legal language. "So what, you own the house again?" "I always did," I said. "But now there's no confusion about it." He tossed the paper back onto the table. "You lied." "No. I gave you an opportunity to read." "You didn't." Bree stood pacing in tight, agitated circles. "You seriously waited until now to pull this? After everything we've done for you?" For me, I laughed quietly. "You mean letting me pay for the roof while you remodeled your bathroom? Or signing up for yoga retreats while I clipped coupons?" Jaron opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. "I didn't trick you," I said, folding my napkin slowly and setting it beside my untouched plate. "I prepared for the moment I'd have to choose between being your mother and being your doormat." Bree's voice dropped. "So what now?" I reached for my phone again, calm as breath. "Now I make one more call." I made the call before I even stood up from the table. The number was already saved in my phone. I didn't rush through dinner. I sliced my bread, carefully chewed slowly, and drank my water until the glass was empty. I gave them their 10 minutes. When I rose from the chair, Jaron followed me down the hall, spitting questions behind me. Bree trailed close behind, phone in hand again, like she was preparing her next performance. I unlocked the front door just as the locksmith's van pulled to the curb. He stepped out, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Here to update the locks on Ms. Hanford's property," he said, eyes scanning the house numbers. Bree sputtered, stepping in front of me. "No, no, no, this isn't happening. You're not changing anything. Our stuff is still inside." The locksmith didn't even look at her. He waited for my nod. I gave it. Jaron's voice sharpened. "You can't do this." "I can," I said. "And I am." The locksmith entered, tools already in hand. I moved aside so he could pass. Bree turned to Jaron like she expected him to fix it with a word. But he just stood there, fists clenched, as if realizing too late that all the shouting in the world wouldn't unlock what was never truly his. "I'll sue," Bree muttered. "You'll regret this." "I hope not," I said. "I'd prefer to never think of you again." The locksmith began at the side door first. Bree protested again, some mixture of legal threats and disbelief, but I stopped listening. I walked to the hall closet, pulled out 2 boxes and handed them to her. "You've got until sunrise," I said. "Take what you need." She stared at the boxes like they were insults. But she took them. By the time I stepped into the kitchen, the locksmith had already started unscrewing the back doorknob. I watched him work each turn of the drill, marking a clean break from the version of my life where I asked for permission in my own home. And then I unplugged the blender. I woke to stillness. No doors slamming. No Bree on the phone. No Jaron stomping down the stairs like the floor owed him something. Just quiet, the kind that presses gently on your chest and lets you exhale without knowing you were holding your breath. The sun hadn't fully crested yet, but I didn't need light to know the house had changed. I slipped on my robe and padded down the hallway, touching the wall as I passed, like I was checking a pulse. The kitchen greeted me like it used to, plain, peaceful mine. Bree's blender sat exactly where she left it. Wires tangled, smeared with protein powder. I unplugged it, coiled the cord, and placed it in the first box by the door. Then I reached for the teapot. My grandmother's round ivory porcelain with a small crack near the spout. It had lived in the back of the cabinet since Bree moved in and said it looked old. I slid it into the center of the counter and rested my hand on it for a moment. Under the table, something fluttered. A meal plan printed in Bree's tidy font. Week 3, gut reset. I didn't read the details. I just crumpled it, dropped it in the bin, and moved on. The fridge had 3 half-open jars of almond butter and a shelf labeled Bree only. I peeled the label off and wiped down the door. I tossed the jars, then added flour, butter, and eggs to the notepad by the fridge. I boiled water, steeped a bag of black tea, and sat at the table with the cup between my palms. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I sipped, slowly, glancing around. A framed photo of Jaron from his college graduation still hung by the pantry. I didn't take it down, but I did notice the space beside it. Empty. Waiting. Ready for something new. That's when the phone rang. The name glowing on the screen was his. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang again. I'd been sitting by the window with a cup of tea and the crossword open in my lap. 4 across false display of affection. 5 letters. I already knew the answer. I didn't rush to answer. Let it ring once more. Then I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and pressed, "Accept," Mom Jaron said. His voice cracked like he hadn't slept. We didn't mean it. It just got heated. I didn't speak. He filled the silence. It was supposed to be a reset. Bree thought maybe we needed space, that we'd all feel better after. I didn't think it'd go like that. There it was. The unraveling. He kept talking. Voice low and rehearsed. "We're at Bree's cousins. For now. They've got kids in every room, no heat in the back, and no Wi-Fi. It's just for a few days. We'll figure something out." Still, I said nothing. "I thought maybe we could talk," he added. "Just like adults. Like adults." As if dumping soup on someone's head had been a minor misstep in a civil discussion. I looked out the window. A sparrow landed on the fence, fluffed its feathers, and flew off again. I brought the phone back to my ear. "I'm busy," I said. He hesitated. What I'm doing, the crossword." I didn't wait for his reply. I ended the call, set the phone down beside my tea, and returned to the puzzle. 4 across false display of affection. I shaded in the letters one by one. Front. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things I no longer had to explain. And that night, I changed the Wi-Fi password. The Smiths knocked just after lunch. They stood on the porch with a covered dish and polite concern behind their eyes. "We heard some shouting yesterday," Mrs. Smith said gently. "Everything okay over here?" I looked at the dish, some kind of casserole still warm. "Just some housekeeping," I said. "Things got a little loud, that's all." She nodded, handed me the pan, and didn't push further. Mr. Smith offered a quiet, "Take care now," before they turned back toward their driveway. I closed the door and locked it behind me. That afternoon, while watering the front steps and pulling weeds from the cracks, I spotted Bree's car. Not at the curb. 3 blocks down, parked awkwardly under a crooked pine tree. She stayed inside, engine off, hands gripping the wheel. Watching. I didn't wave. I didn't move toward her. I just pulled the hose taut and kept working. She drove off 5 minutes later, tires turning too fast for someone with nowhere to go. The next morning, the mailman handed me a bundle directly instead of leaving it in the box. "Quiet around here today," he said. His eyes lingered on the new locks, then flicked to the windows. I nodded. Finally. He smiled. Well, glad things are settled. I carried the mail inside, sorted the envelopes. 2 bills, 1 card from Miriam, a catalog I didn't ask for, and placed the casserole in the fridge. The air in the house was clean. Still, I no longer flinched when the floor creaked or the pipes knocked. There were no more whispered complaints about the thermostat, no more trail of Bree's shoes across the hall, no more lectures about how boundaries work from the boy I once held through every fever and heartbreak. The neighbors knew now. So did the mailman. They'd seen just enough. Heard the edge in Jaren's voice. Watched Bree peel away like a bad idea. And I didn't have to explain anything. That evening, I walked into the guest room and opened the closet. Their things were still there. The envelope came on a Thursday. No return address, just my name in Bree's handwriting, sharp, narrow strokes, each letter pressed too hard into the paper. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I knew that urgency, that tilt in her slant. I'd seen it on sticky notes left by the coffee pot, in scrawled grocery lists she never paid for. Still, I opened it. "I'm pregnant," it began. No greeting, no apology. "Jaren said you'd still help. We can't do this alone." That was it. No warmth, no reflection. Just a presumption that I was still on the hook. That I'd fold at the word pregnant the way I once folded at struggling. Laid off just this once. I read it. Once. Then set the letter on the counter and turned back to my tea. The kettle clicked off behind me. I poured the water, let the steam rise. The letter sat by the sugar jar, as quiet and dry as the tone it was written in. There had been a time I would have rushed to buy prenatal vitamins, to book doctor appointments, to rearrange furniture, and stock a nursery. That version of me had made space for them again and again. And they had walked through it like it was owed. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where soup once ran in rivulets down my cheek. I folded my hands in my lap and sipped. I had spent my life helping, jumping in, covering gaps, making excuses. I'd turned silence into safety even when it cost me voice and pride. But something had shifted. Maybe not loudly, maybe not all at once, but enough. Now I was learning how to keep my hands still. I left the letter on the counter. Bree would call next, I was sure. But I wouldn't answer just yet. Instead, I opened the back door and let the breeze in. The guest room was still full of their things, but I had something else in mind for that space. The dining table is quiet now. I run my fingers along the edge of the wood, scarred slightly, where Bree once dropped a knife, faintly sun-faded on one side from years of afternoon light. It's just a table again, not a stage, not a battleground. Tonight I set one place, a simple plate of roasted squash bread I baked this morning and a glass of water. No folded napkins for guests, no extra glasses for wine I never liked. Just what I need, no more. I light a single candle, not for show, not for anyone else's approval. Just a steady flame to mark the moment as mine. The chair across from me is empty. That's all right. I'm not waiting for it to be filled. I've stopped arranging things for people who arrive late and leave early, who show up only when it suits them. Some meals are better without conversation. I slice the squash slowly, the knife gliding clean. The bread is still warm at the center, soft and real. I chew each bite without hurry, without glancing up to anticipate a comment, a rolled eye, a complaint about seasoning. There's nothing to dodge, nothing to flinch from. There's no soup in my hair, no sharp words disguised as suggestions, no smirking over empty plates, just me. A woman who once gave everything at this table, and now, finally, sits in peace. I eat until I'm full, not until someone else has decided the meal is done. I leave the dishes for later, fold the napkin into a triangle, and place it neatly on the plate. I blow out the candle. The wick glows for a moment, then darkens. There's still time left in the evening. Maybe I'll read. Maybe I'll sit on the porch and listen to the wind for a while. But first I open the hallway closet. There's one last thing I need to carry out.